In this video I show you how I successfully bred the notoriously hard to breed Blue Death Feigning Beetle. It took about 6 months from egg to adult beetle. In the first section of the video I talk about how to raise a larvae from egg to fully grown larvae. In the second section I explain the incubation stage from the grown larvae through the pupal stage to the adult beetle. At the end I also talk about some of the problems I ran into during the process. There are two main ways of raising the larvae. The first method is to keep the eggs and larvae together with the adults in the same terrarium. This means you can't use a plain sand substrate, but need to add organic material. This is my mixture: sand, cocoa coir, humus, leaf litter and white rotting wood. You can also simply use just normal potting soil and add some leaf litter. I tested this in a separate setup and it worked very well. Just make sure the soil contains no fertilizer or pesticides. You need to add a good amount of this organic substrate to the terrarium. You also have to add food such as dried mealworms, shrimps or fish food on top of the substrate for the larvae. Be aware that the combination of organic substrate, food and water can get moldy very quickly, which can be harmful for you and your beetles. The beetles lay their eggs either on top of the substrate or slightly buried in it. The second method is to remove the eggs and raise the larvae separately. I prefer this method because the larvae are much easier to monitor and you don't have to destroy your display tank every time you search for larvae. You also don't need to add water to the adult enclosure and mold is much easier to control. For this method I use a very fine sandy substrate and keep the beetles on it during the egg laying season. Every few weeks I sieve the sand and collect a large number of eggs and freshly hatched larvae. I then transfer them into their own container with the same substrate mix I showed earlier. Every few days or weeks I sprinkle new food on top and add water to one side of the container. This creates a clearly visible moisture gradient, allowing the larvae to choose where they want to stay. I also added springtails to the moist side, which help prevent mold outbreaks. In this jar I tested potting soil as a substrate, and it worked just as well. You can clearly see the moisture gradient from top to bottom. The tunnels of the larger larvae are clearly visible, and sometimes you can even see the larvae moving behind the glass. I've read a lot about cannibalism in larvae, but I personally can't confirm this. It may happen, but if it did, it wasn't noticeable in my setup. Still, you should always make sure there's enough food available. After about 3 to 4 months, the larvae were large enough to be moved into the incubator. This is a very important step, because otherwise the larvae will not pupate and may die. At this stage I collected the largest larvae and left the smaller ones in the container to continue growing. Each larvae was placed into its own cup with the same substrate it had before and then stacked into the incubator. Don't add too much food as it molds very quickly in the incubator and can be harmful to both you and the beetles. Because of this I had to change the substrate in the cups several times. I set the incubator to 32 degrees Celsius and 75% humidity. I strongly recommend placing additional thermometers and hygrometers inside the incubator, as there can be different temperature zones and the built-in display may be inaccurate, as it was in my case. After a few weeks to a few months, the first pupae appeared. This is the first stage of pupation. After a few days, the white pupae turned into a red beetle, still lying on its back. A few days later, they already look like fully formed beetles, just red in color, and they are already moving. I kept them in the incubator until they turned black or blue already. The fully developed adults were then moved into a quarantine tank for a few weeks. This tank contained sand and organic substrate, some hides, as well as water and food. As soon as I introduced the new beetles, they immediately started eating. During the 6 months of breeding, I encountered several problems. The first one was the incubator. Its display showed different humidity values than the hygrometers inside, and I had to modify it to lower the humidity. I strongly advise against using an incubator in any way other than what the manufacturer recommends. The high humidity also led to massive mite outbreaks, which ate the larvae's food and potentially poisoned the substrate. Because of this, I had to drastically reduce the humidity. This wasn't ideal for the larvae, and I experienced significant die-offs, even though I manually added water every few days or weeks. Larvae and pupae require very stable temperature and humidity conditions. Due to the mite outbreak, I also had to reduce the substrate depth. This led to surface pupations, as the substrate was no longer deep or stable enough for proper burrowing chambers. Surface pupations can be fatal, but placing a piece of cork bark next to the pupae can help. It allows them to move and rotate properly, a useful trick I learned from Aquarium's pets. In the end, 8 beetles successfully pupated, out of 50 larvae in the incubator, which results in a success rate of 16%. This is very low, but due to the problems I encountered regarding the incubator and mites, I am still happy as this was my first try.